I'm Diana Alvear, and welcome to Next 20. And right off the bat, I'm going to have you check in with yourself right now. How are you feeling? Are you feeling scattered? Maybe you're thinking about your to-do list. Maybe you're feeling some anxiety over things that you need to get done tonight. Maybe you're feeling fearful about the future. Maybe you're feeling a blend of hope and fear. Maybe you're sad. If you're feeling a mix of these kinds of emotions, you are far from alone. I have felt them and so many others have felt them. And mental health is really top of mind after the tumultuous, chaotic, and fearful last 14 months that we've had. I want to start off with some statistics to put this all into reference. So 44% of adults say their stress has increased over the last 5 years. 56% of employees say stress and anxiety impacts their performance on the job. And 62% of missed work days can be attributed to a mental condition. So clearly, mental health is having a massive effect on our performance in the workplace. So what can we do about it? The first thing we can do is talk openly about it and destigmatize it. So Next 20 is Verizon's series where we examine the issues that are going to shape the next 20 years. And this is a huge one. This is going to impact everything. So we're going to turn now to Aaron Harvey. He is the co-founder and executive director of the Made of Millions Foundation. So Aaron, welcome to Next 20. And I would love for you to just start with your personal story and what inspired Made of Millions.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. So for me, this conversation is very important, but also very personal. When I was probably as young as 8, 10 years old, I started having these unwanted thoughts. I didn't know what they were, and they gave me tons of anxiety. My brain would tell me things like, I wanted to harm my sister, I wanted to grab a knife and murder my parents, or I was going to harm a child. Just anything you can imagine where you're like, in that nightmarish landscape of like, I love my family. Why would I have a thought about harming them? And it took me about 2.5 decades before I finally realized what was going on. And that's obviously because these thoughts were so taboo and there was so much shame attached to them that I never shared this information with anyone. And so, a big problem that comes from that is all of the comorbid anxiety, depression, substance abuse, things that come from trying to quiet the mind in ways that are unhealthy, because you're forcing things down. So when I was 33, I finally searched my symptoms online, which seems funny because I work in digital and been helping build the internet for a while. So you'd think I would have turned to the internet a long time ago, but there's a feeling that if you do that there really is an admission that there's a problem. And so that was something I really feared, right? And then also the idea of privacy and fear that, it could be tracked. And what if I do act out? And now there's data that says that I did that. So that was when everything turned for me. And that was when once I got my oxygen mask on, I started to work in the advocacy space. And that's, essentially how we launched Made of Millions.
So, that took incredible amounts of courage to just do that. And I feel like that's the really sad thing about people that are suffering when it comes to mental health, because it's almost like it's shameful to admit that you need help. It's shameful to admit that you have a problem. We've got to keep this facade on all the time that it's good, I'm good, it's all good, when really it's not like that. And I had my own issues with that too, until I realized it was way better for me to be honest about where I truly was. So I want to ask you, you told us your personal story. So how did that lead to Made of Millions, and who do you serve?
Yeah, so, I put on my shoes when I was kind of 12, 13. And I was like, if I was that old now and I was experiencing what I experienced, what would I need to find on the internet to help me understand what was going on, to make me feel seen and understood, and to give me the psychoeducation that I need to actually go and talk about it. And so we launched a website. It was intrusivethoughts.org at first, and it was very much, let's find everybody coming from search engines who are frantically and desperately searching these symptoms, and let's give them a soft landing where they can feel seen, connect to other allies, and get, the information that they need to go navigate their care, to share with their parents, to share with a counselor, and to actually like make sure they get the right kind of treatment. So that was how it started. And over the course of a couple of years of just running that as a side project, what I saw was this community online that was working in a grassroots way to solve the mental health problem, the crisis, right? And it was moms and teachers and firefighters and pastors and, corporate entrepreneurs, et cetera, all doing their piece. And all these people were affected by mental health, right? So they were there doing the work because the government wasn't doing it. The businesses weren't doing it. We didn't learn anything as a society growing up. So that was what Made of Millions really was born, because it was the idea that the change that we want to see is being made by the millions of people who are affected by mental health, who are actually taking that bold step to, step out and help other people once they feel like they're doing better themselves.
I love that. It's so true. It's everybody. You never know when it's going to sneak up on you. And hearing you talk about intrusive thoughts, I remember right after I had my firstborn, my son. Oh my gosh! I mean, they tell you about postpartum depression, but nobody talked to me about postpartum anxiety. And I had massive PPA where I couldn't sleep at night. Even if the baby was sleeping, I couldn't sleep at night. I had these terrible thoughts about terrible things happening to him, terrible thoughts about my own motherhood skills. And fortunately, at the time, I wasn't necessarily working. Well, fast forward to when I had my daughter. And once again, the sleeplessness, the anxiety, but this time I had to go to work. And that's where it got really hard. I mean, I kind of, thank goodness I knew that this was definitely a possibility for me the next time I had a child. But now I had to cope with being sleepless, anxious, scared, and go to work and perform. So I really want to talk about normalizing mental health in the workplace because, I felt like I didn't know how much I could say about it at the time. I was just kind of silently struggling or, texting with friends who were moms as well. But I really didn't feel like I could talk about it at work. So can you tell me a little bit about the need to have these conversations in the workplace?
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, we turned our energy to the workforce. And the primary insight behind that was that in the workforce, we have a captive audience. And if corporations are willing to invest, we can actually provide every new mother with the idea that your brain might kick off thoughts about harming or, drowning or throwing your child that you love so much. And this anxiousness, why am I having these thoughts? Am I a bad person? Am I a bad mother? And that's really simple information that if you were provided, you could have anticipated it. And you could have known what steps to take to help calm your mind and, get you on the path that you need to be. So to me, the workforce, it just represents the opportunity to educate society at scale and to do so without basically to normalize it, right? Democratize it, right? I mean, we know that mental health care is a privilege of the few. And to be able to say, imagine a 16-year-old working at a fast food restaurant flipping burgers, getting the same education that the chief marketing officer in New York City is getting, that's like a great equalizer. And so that's why it's so important to start thinking about using the workforce to do that and where a lot of our inspiration came from.
I love that, but I do wonder about normalizing is the word, right? And normalizing means talking about it openly and stuff. And yet there's still that feeling of, I've got to present to the world that I have it all together. And I can see where it'd be very frightening for someone to be open about struggling with their mental health. Is that going to have a negative impact on my career and getting promoted or the way my leadership skills are viewed? I can see where somebody would, even if they have access to these sorts of resources, tell me a little bit about some of the things that are holding people back from taking advantage of these resources and how your group can help mitigate that.
Well, I think you bring up a really good point that often gets overlooked. And that's frankly that probably in most workplaces, even in the US and in Western countries, it's still not safe to disclose those things. not safe because you could be subject to discrimination. You could be passed over and, for an opportunity in the organization. You could be the source of gossip. You could get terminated because, there's a feeling that you're not able to do your job. And that's sort of a sober reality that we have to remember as we're out there advocating. So when I told my story, frankly, I wasn't particularly, excited to do that. It was a very scary thing. I thought it might affect my clients. It might affect my team. Is someone going to want to be in the office late with me working? Are they going to think like, maybe, what is my mind doing? But I was in a very major position of privilege running my own ad agency. And I had to do it because it was incumbent upon me. But it's not for a lot of people. So I think, all the things that people fear, those really are factors, right? The feeling of being looked over and all the other things that I mentioned. That's why it takes a strategy for a company to lead that way and lead by example and provide pathways for employees, because it shouldn't be on them. It should be, the education. Well, first of all, the commitment, the education, and the pathways have to be provided by the corporation, or I would never do that, right? I would never share that information.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. What about, I was looking at some of the things that you offer. What is the mental health matrix, and how does that work in the workplace?
So we've been working with Verizon Media on a variety of different initiatives. And one of those is a global workplace study where we're actually taking a deep dive into workplace mental health and doing so through an intersectional lens, because you can't deny the relationship between mental health and diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're not mutually exclusive. So through that study, we've arrived at a model for looking at all the different ways that our emotional health can be taxed, strained, or challenged in the workplace. And so for us, we're looking at the idea that some of it is onset and can happen like grief immediately out of nowhere, a miscarriage. Some of it is, ongoing, like I'm living with chronic anxiety or depression. So we're kind of looking at different things like that, and ultimately saying we have mental health conditions. So those are medically diagnosed conditions, OCD, anxiety, etc. We have mental health situations. Those are situations in which I've had a life event that is providing a lot of stress or trauma. We have mental health intersections. And in those intersections, that's actually looking at discrimination and other diversity, equity, inclusion related issues that can happen. And then we're looking at triggers, mental health triggers. And that's like, are you creating a healthy work environment? Is your meeting in a healthy workspace? Like everything from environmental to how I show up in the workplace. So when we look at those 4 buckets, we actually can start to imagine that, Jane, who lives with obsessive compulsive disorder, who is experiencing, trauma or grief after losing, after a miscarriage, who also, as an Asian American woman, is experiencing some microaggression in the workplace. What I hope is it creates a lot of empathy for management to sort of say, this individual is going through a lot. And that can lead to solutions that come out of that, like accommodations and other things of that nature.
I love that, because then, it seems like it gets generalized, right? Like mental health, but it's so complex. I mean, like you said, it's situational. Like, in my case, like my anxiety dissipated as I got more sleep, as I got more confident in my skills as a mom. But, for others, it's chronic, and it's something that you're going to have to live with day to day. And that's absolutely going to have an effect on your work. I want to talk to you a little bit about 2020 in particular, though, because that year was unique in a lot of ways and put a lot of undue stress, like the things we never thought. I mean, I never in my lifetime thought I was going to be trying to live through a pandemic. And then, everything that happened with the social justice issues. And, you really felt a definitive kind of, I don't know, break or milestone after the murder of George Floyd. And it felt like all of a sudden people really needed to talk. They really needed to say what was on their hearts. And it was amazing to me. I was watching, people in corporate America open up about, years of trauma and the things that were difficult for them. And I thought, wow, like I never thought I'd see this in corporate America. So I feel like there are parallels here because, all of that obviously has created so much more stress for people. And I wanted to ask you particularly, did you see a need, more of a need for the services that you provide? Did you see more companies reach out and say, hey, we've got to do something? Can you just tell me a little bit about the impact of 2020 on the work that you do?
Overall, trends that we're starting to see is executive leadership stepping up and at least stating that there's a problem that should be addressed and a commitment that the organization can put behind it. I think that's a critical step. Other trends that we're seeing are what we call like mental health champions in the workplace, where, they've been doing this work for years, secretly and silently, building little committees or, doing little salons at midnight in the basement, like with a bunch of other people from other companies, like that energy and that movement where people are grabbing the reins of it and trying to move it forward in conjunction with HR is a trend we're seeing. We're also seeing DE&I and mental health converging completely under HR, and HR needs a lot of help and a lot of resources. And you'll see in the study that we did with Verizon Media that that's a huge strain on HR right now because they're having to basically also handle that burden while handling all of their other functions. So I definitely would imagine there will be more specificity in an org chart that builds around how to support emotional health and wellness in the workplace and how that connects in a way that's not siloed with DE&I and other like human resources initiatives. And then with the Mind Together coalition that Made of Millions is doing with Verizon Media and other partners like Spotify, it's the commitment to education, to psychoeducation. Because at the end of the day, a company is not going to be your armchair psychiatrist or psychologist. Your manager is not there to do that. But what your manager should be there to do is create a mentally safe environment, be an ally to you in a time of need, connect you to the resources that the company can provide, support your education and your access to those things. And that's really as far likely as that individual can go. So again, like I'm hoping that the trend that we see is just a continuation of the three layers. It's like advocacy, education, and then access to very good mental health resources.
How about person to person? Like, for example, I've always been very open about the fact that I had therapy and it did wonders for me. And, I think it's important to destigmatize, all mental health resources. So I try to be an open book about that sort of thing, but not everybody's going to feel comfortable doing that. So on an individual basis in the workplace, what can we, each of us, do in order to further this kind of a mission and be more empathetic and be more of a resource and helpful to our fellow teammates?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things you can do, something that we try to call like mindful management of yourself and your team and everyone around you. I think first is definitely making sure the oxygen mask is on yourself, because the way that you show up is a trigger and it sets the tone for everyone else's interaction. And so doing little things like calming your nervous system down before you're going into a stressful meeting can completely change the way that you as an individual behave in that meeting and can help support everyone else's mind health in that space. So that's a very small thing, right? Then being able to recognize that the way we use language is different. And I might personally resonate with being a sufferer where someone else doesn't want to be seen that way. And we see a lot of this in the DE&I space as well, right? A lot of people don't know how to talk about race in the workplace. So you can do the research to understand the different types of language that's out there. What's stigmatizing language? What's things to stay away from? What are things that just stereotype people and put them in a box? That really helps and can make you be a better ally, present yourself as a better ally with mental health in the workplace, certainly. And then being that champion who takes the time to learn about all of the company's resources and what actually is available. And if there are things that aren't available, flagging that up to HR and trying to get more things integrated. But even just knowing that here's everything that's available. If someone's having a challenge, you can let them be aware. You'd be shocked how often it is that people don't understand what the EAP does, or offers in large companies. Just don't understand what it does. So there, that's a key thing. So yeah, there's a lot of things. And I think the last thing I would say is just remembering, like, you're not there to solve anyone's problems. I think a lot of times in the workplace, we want to present a solution. Oh, John is stressed, so let's give John, let's move this project over here or do this little thing. If John opens up to you and shares something with you, that in itself, you just listening and letting that person feel heard and seen is probably all you need to do, right? And then asking John, how do you want me to check in with you? Like, this sounds serious. Like, can I check in with you in this way, in this capacity, right? Because everyone is different. I don't want to be checked in. I don't want to be tended to, but I don't mind telling you so that we're on the same page. And if you see me going down a path, you can kind of grab me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you're right. It's so individual and that's why I said, I know that I can be open about it, but not everybody is going to have that kind of feeling of comfort, especially in the workplace. So, I know that Verizon is just such a big company. We have thousands of employees. We have people who work in the field. We have people who work in our stores. We have people who work at corporate, doing a whole range of different kinds of workplace activities. And yet it feels to me like mental health is something that would affect any of them. I mean, it just doesn't discriminate. So what can be done to ensure that everyone, no matter what you do, has access to this kind of education and information?
I think it's really important to talk about mental health through an intersectional lens in the workforce. We have to recognize that we have people from every generation, from every race, every sexual orientation, religion, and other. And when we look at something like a mental health condition, it gives us more empathy if we understand the other intersectional challenges that can layer on top of that and make that more difficult. That can be tied to systemic racism and exacerbated by a trial that's taking place. It can be tied to the way that an older generation may not talk about their mental health openly versus a more youthful Gen Z generation talking about it more openly. So there's a lot of different factors, and I think the more that we can understand as individual advocates and bring empathy to that will make us much more effective in being able to reach people and hopefully support them if they need help.
I want to make sure that everybody that's watching can find you and find your organization and all the multitude of resources that you have available on your website. So can you tell us a little bit about how to find you and then what resources you have available?
Yeah, absolutely. So Made of Millions Foundation, our mission is to change how the world perceives mental health. We do a lot of work to democratize access to mental health education. You can go to madeofmillions.com, where we have a ton of advocacy information. We've got workplace guides. We've got information on over 30 conditions, lots of video content. So definitely a good educational stop there. And then also on Instagram at Made of Millions, we launched a lot of campaigns and other types of advocacy things. And you can reach out, volunteer, write articles. There's a lot of work to do. So we're here for it.
Yes, you can be one of the many millions that are helping move this forward and help other people. Well, I can't thank you enough, Aaron, for talking to us about this. I mean, it's super timely. I think that everybody has felt the weight of the past year or so in some form or another. So I appreciate you. I appreciate the work that your organization is doing. And I really hope that this truly can become destigmatized, because mental health is just as important as any other kind of health. So thank you, Aaron. And for those of you watching right now, this is what we talk about on Next 20. These are the issues that are going to be impacting the next 20 years. And this is how we're going to shape the future that we want for ourselves and for our children. So Aaron, thank you so much.
Thank you.